get to work on actually restoring some of this beautiful machine. I've got a new belt here for the actual front. I'll show it a little bit more closely once I get the old one off, but it's just about as ragged as you can get without actually being broken in two. Just for a better visual of old versus new, they're not even the same thickness any further. This one has teeth and this one has the remnants of teeth. Well, I decided that the easiest way for me to get this new belt on is, instead of trying to wiggle it through there, kill two birds with one stone and take off this belly pan. That pan right there covers up the harmonic balancer as well as where everything runs through. So I'm going to take that off and show you the mound of grease and dirt and grass clippings that have been built up in there for who knows how long. Well, here is the pile. Just about as so ugly it doesn't want to focus on camera. Drag the container I'm going to drop it in. Don't want to get it even in the dirt. This is so much oil, I might as well get it in my little container. But just from months and years and years and years of labor and having a front main seal leak, I suppose, now you got about 10 pounds of worst form of building material I've ever seen in my life. Well, I've got the new belt on, nice and tightened up. Hopefully that won't squeal upon startup, but now it's time to start working on the injector pump. It's over there in the vise ready to be rebuilt, and I don't want her to keep on waiting for too much longer. I'm going to take out the fuel filter elements, replace them with ones that I bought off of eBay. Well, I've got this primary filter out, and I think it was in need of changing. So I'm going to clean out this casing. Everything at the bottom of there is all sludge. So I'm going to empty both of those out, spray them out with some brake clean, and then hopefully put in my new filters, put on the top and redo the seals, and that'll be done. And as expected, this one's perfectly clean. Just a little bit of debris built up around the cork on the top of it, but I can't see anything wrong. And do the same with the oil filter elements, and hopefully change the oil and start work on seeing what I can do to really start repairing this thing. Nice and black. Fresh seals and fresh filters going in. When I was parking it last time, I pressed the left-hand brake, and all of a sudden, she doesn't want to move anymore. So I'm going to dismantle the actual brake assembly right here. It's kind of like a reverse clutch where you press in on the brake and it pushes it together, jamming the gear attached to the axle and stopping this main tire from rotating. So, need to repair that before I do any more work on it, especially for it to move around the farm. I've already opened the top bleeder valve right here. Let all that fluid out. This pedal moves fluid. So therefore the problem is definitely not the fact that the actual pedal and the valve inside there is stuck. It is that the friction plates on the inside of here have somehow welded themselves together. So I'm going to disassemble this, see what I can do. Well, I can't even believe this thing rolled beforehand. So you can see it's so caked on, it's got this spring stuck in place. And luckily these plates don't seem to be that bad. They've got plenty of wear left on them. So I'm going to find some way to clean this up, and hopefully I'll be able to just reassemble it and be on my way. I did have to cut the U-bolt for the actual fender off. It's not spaced to any degree to where you can get through there without moving the fender, and those bolts have been on there since factory, so I've got new ones ordered and just decided to cut the loss and trying to save time. Well, it's time to clean these up. I'm not going to clean the friction plates to the same extent that I'm going to clean up the spacers in between, or the actual friction surfaces, but I'm going to get them smooth and hopefully remove a lot of this particulate that's built on them. And I don't want to see a ridge of where these things have been stuck on for so long built up on it. Then I'll move on to cleaning out the inside here. I have new springs ordered. They were way too expensive, but I need them because these two are frozen inside of there and I got the other two salvaged. And I know I'll most likely have to eventually do the same thing to the opposite side's brake drum. Well, it's time to do some reassembly. I've cleaned up all these surfaces to a pretty nice shine and got new springs and old springs because I bought 4. I'm expecting to have to do the same thing to the other side though eventually. And by eventually, I mean when I step on this pedal right here. Now that I've got everything polished up, I'll start the assembly process, slip everything on. I've got it from back to front and kind of tap in and out as I put everything on. Got the old U-bolt off, got the new one right here. I'm gonna put that on, crank it down. And then, next up, the air filters, which, main one's right there, which is held in this little housing right here. Simply pull the lever, disconnects. Remove this piece, which I would call the retainer, and then simply pull on this. You gain access to the filter housing, which needs to be changed. And there we go. Now I just need to clean out all the rat's nests inside of there, and hopefully we'll be off to the races again. Next on the agenda, removing the hydraulic oil filter. Well, here's the filter housing and the inner and outer halves of the actual connectors. That keeps it away from this face, and this keeps an O-ring around the outside of this filter. It's new old stock, straight out of the 70s, I could say. Came with a gasket. I'm gonna have to remake it. As you can see, as soon as I took it out of the box, it is so brittle that it just breaks apart. In fact, I think I could show you. Yeah. So I'm going to use this actual cover, put it on the outside here, draw around it, cut it out, and have a new gasket so I can reassemble this with the new old filter and use this cool paper diagram they have for all of your needs. First job is to clean all this out, and I'm glad I have already taken this out because all that is water, and I don't believe this filter was changed in the last 30-40 years. Here's the new filter assembly altogether. Outside side, you got a filter screen and that little spring that holds you off the actual case. Inside, you've got an O-ring and the actual mount that goes towards the tractor. Here's the gasket I made, fully put on. I'm gonna wait until it sets up a little bit further, and then I'm gonna carve off all this excess, make it look pristine, and then it's just on to getting it running again, and I can test out and see if it's helped at all. One step forward, and hopefully not a couple steps back, but even then, I'm happy to work on it. I'm gonna crack into the injection pump and rebuild it, so hopefully this machine can run a little bit better and not die in deep breaths, because right now I believe that it's trying to run away because of the fact that it's not pushing enough fluid through this pump. So maybe I can help that along and have this thing run well enough to idle so I can fix all the hydraulic issues with it.
I'm not who are you?
So, I've got the pump mostly back together by now. I'm just putting in the hydraulic advance and finishing up on the actual linkage for the throttle. This has been like going from preschool to like high school as far as difficulty of working on a pump. The CAV on the David Brown is nowhere near as complex as this, but the basic principle, if I'm understanding it correctly, is the fact that inside of here there is a rotating assembly of weights, and as this whole assembly spins, it flings out those weights and moves a cuff forward, causing, whenever there's no tension on this whole piece to be moved backwards, and therefore your throttle, which is right beneath there, to move. Then, when you want the fuel to be shut off, you counteract that weight balance by pushing that cuff backwards with the spring that's attached to this linkage, goes down and forks around that cuff, and in the process, it shuts off your throttle. So, therefore, no fuel, as much fuel as you can have. And that's the actual shifting of it. Now, this hydraulic advance is pretty interesting as far as the system is concerned. Here we have the pieces. This is the interior, exterior. You see there's only one spring, while this one is actually a dual sprung system. And here's your actual shift piece. As fluid is being sent from either side of this piston on the inside of this pump, that actually fills up this reservoir and causes pressure to be sent to both sides. As more pressure is made, the hydraulic advance is sent to one side or the other, moving a cuff on the inside of here. That little movement you see is the cuff. That's actually changing where the race is sitting for the pump to be moving around and causing pressure. So you are mechanically advancing your timing as it is getting higher and higher up in the RPM range because it's building more pressure, and the rollers for the actual vane pump are thrown out further and making more pressure. It's an amazing system, and it was all designed in the 40s, and it really hasn't been changed in a long time. This, with a slightly different setup as far as cylinders, all the only difference really is there's 8 of these output ports rather than just the 6 for this pump. It's used on the IDI engines, it's used on the international trucks, it's used now by Bosch, this same kind of styling for the VE pumps on the Cummins. I mean, it is used in so many applications, and this specific Rusa Master frame design with 4 or 6 cylinders was used in agricultural equipment all the way back to the 40s and all the way up until about the 90s, and I believe they're still making them in a little bit different senses with electronic assist. I'm going to finish up on the hydraulic advance, get the throttle set correctly, and then it's going on to the tractor. I've got to say, I'm kind of proud of myself. It's not the greatest paint job, but it shines, and compared to all the other dinginess around it, you can tell that it's been worked on. So right now, I'm going to clean up all the actual nozzles to fit in here and take out the little packing that I have inside of each one of these cylinder holes, and then I'll get her all buttoned up and ready to start worrying about starting it. I've made a lot of progress with this machine between changing the hydraulic filter and fluid, changing the oil filter and fluids, changing the fuel filter, putting new fuel in it, messing around with the injection pump and rebuilding it, and putting on a brand new belt. It's almost a new machine as far as mechanics are concerned, and it just about runs like it. Now, there are a good number of things that I need to fix after the fact, but for right now, I'm needing to trade out. I've got the David Brown sitting behind the combine shed, and right now, I've been having the same scenery for about the last month, and I think it's time for a change. So I'm going to scoot this thing out of here, put it where the David Brown sits, bring the David Brown inside of here, and start buttoning up the final couple pieces between thermostat and a few new gauges on the David Brown to get it in a fully operational condition, and see really where I can find parts for this machine. Now, obviously, I've gotten it running, and I've gotten it to build oil pressure, and now I'm seeing a lot of the problems that had it parked in the first place. For instance, there's two small lines on the opposite side that feed into the main oil cooler for this whole machine, sitting in front of the radiator. Both of those lines have holes in them. I need to find a way to either replace or really fix those lines, as well as a few of the seals feeding into the turbo on that high pressure side. They're weeping as well. Other than those engine components, I've got a lot to do as far as the rear hydraulics and 3-point. Now, the PTO I've gotten to work on and off. Most of the reason I think it wasn't working prior was the fact that the hydraulic filter was plugged up, as well as it being low on fluid. However, 3-point, as far as I can tell, still will not function, which I believe is a problem with the valve and the main valve assembly that both feeds the 3-point as well as the attached SCVs, single control valves. Now, once I get those working, this machine will be brand new, but for the time being, I've got about 7 or 8 things that I need to research and look into buying. Obviously, it's mismatched tires still. I've got the rim and tire that's the wrong size still on it, but I've got the old rim and old tire sitting over there. Sad thing is, that old tire is glued to chew through. There's a reason that this one is on there, even though it looks poor. It's because it functions. So once I can find a set of good front tires, and most likely a set of rears that are used, I'll put those on, and this machine will finally start looking a little bit better. But I just need a change of scenery, and really, I don't have parts for this thing anymore. So I might as well keep on moving on with all my other projects, as well as cleaning up in the shop. After I move this out, there's a lot of nuts, bolts, debris, oil, and diesel that's been thrown onto the ground while this has been sitting here. So I need to clean up, and also I've got a lot of organization to do. So I just can't thank you guys enough for watching, and I'll leave you on a high note of this thing starting up and driving out of here. It'll start up again.
I didn't stick it in my pocket.